Ladies and gentlemen, sports fans alike, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. One of the couple, two, three best podcasts around. So sit back, grab yourself a cold one and a Polish sausage, park your keister in the French room, and listen to Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago.
In Chicago, you know that all sports rock. The Bears, Hawks, Bulls, Cubs, and Sox. Pick your favorite, you can choose. As long as the Packers lose. For everything you need to know, it's Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. This is your host, Sean. We have an exciting episode for you today. I thought it was going to be a little slow, but things picked up definitely in Chicago sports. We have Matt Forte no longer with the Chicago Bears. The Bulls absolutely imploding. The Blackhawks having a little road bump in their path to the Stanley Cup championship. And we are breaking down the cornerbacks in this NFL draft. All this and more on Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. But, as always, before we get started, I'd like to thank our sponsor, the Rockford Ice Hogs. If you're not familiar with the Rockford Ice Hogs, they're the AHL minor league team of the Chicago Blackhawks. Get to see the Stars of Tomorrow today at a family affordable price. Tickets starting at just $7. Located only 90 minutes from the city limits. And with upcoming home games, Wednesday, February 17th, Friday, February 19th. You can get tickets and more at icehogs.com. Tell them Swerski Sports sent you. I want to talk about the Bulls first. I really didn't want to. I really almost just skipped them because I'm so frustrated with this team and what they're doing. But I really feel the need that I got to get this off my chest. There are problems up and down this team, and I'm absolutely shocked. Last season, I thought the additions that they made were really going to help. Thought they would be able to play a small lineup, a big lineup, anywhere in between, and match up with anybody and be able to create matchup problems. And that's just not the way it went. You follow that up with the absolute debacle that was the management and the head coach and their interaction relationship. And that ends up with Tom Thibodeau getting fired, and rightfully so. I mean, I've said it before. There was a lot of things he was doing that were detrimental to the team. Case in point, just running everybody into the ground, and it was causing issues. But he was getting the most out of his players. Management felt otherwise, and they brought in the coach that they handpicked. I mean, Gar Forman and John Paxson handpicked Fred Hoiberg. They handpicked him. This is their guy. They gave him a 5-year deal. First-time NBA coach, 5-year deal, saying, here's the keys to the Bulls. Run it. And you can't put all the blame on him. He's had his troubles. He's had issues relating to the players, winning this team over, some coaching gaffes. But you can't put it all on him. These are professional players, and you have to be able to put this on general manager too, because Gar Forman and John Paxson, they picked their coach saying, this is the guy, and we're giving him this roster. We're giving him a 5-year deal. This is the roster. And that for me screams, this is win now. You have to win now. And this team is not winning anything. They may not even make the playoffs. I thought it would be just an absolute given that they'd make the playoffs. But it's no longer the case. I mean, they're only, a game and a half up on the last spot? I mean, it's getting a little ridiculous. You've got Taj Gibson, who is trying to throw the management and the coaching staff under the bus by saying, well, we used to be a defensive team, and then now we're an offensive team, and trying to figure out what we are. Really, Taj? Really? You are a professional basketball player. You make a lot of money. Paul Gasol makes a lot of money. Jimmy Butler makes a lot of money. Joakim Noah makes a lot of money. Everybody makes a lot of money. They make lots and lots of money to play this game. It's time to put on your big boy pants, Taj, and man up, look in the mirror, look at your teammates, and say, hey, we are not playing well. When I go out and watch that team play, I don't go out and watch them. When I sit on my couch and I watch this team play, I'm not watching John Paxson not defend anybody or miss open shots or turn the ball over. No, I'm watching Taj Gibson do it. I'm watching Derrick Rose do it. I'm not watching Jimmy Butler do it because he blew his knee out. I'm watching Paul Gasol do it. And it's nonsense. They may have made bad decisions, but you're the ones that can't play worth a crap. So don't give me that crap, Taj Gibson. And you follow that up with Derrick Rose. Derrick Rose, oh, I can't play because of general body soreness. You know what? Jimmy Butler hurt his knee. He's out at least a month. And everybody stepped up big time when Derrick Rose got his knee hurt. When Derrick Rose's knee was hurt, everybody stepped up. Every time his knee hurt. All 17 times that his knee hurt for missing 3 seasons. I mean, but they need him to step up when Jimmy Butler gets hurt? No. He's got general soreness. You're a general pain in the ass, Derrick Rose. It's absolutely ridiculous. You are theoretically in your deluded mind saying, well, I'm saving myself for a max contract deal. Nobody's giving Derrick Rose a max contract deal in 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, anytime in the future. Not going to happen. Not going to happen. Derrick Rose, you are a role player at this point in your career. You are not great. You are not even, you're barely good. Barely. So Derrick Rose is on my list. You've got Jimmy Butler, who now they're saying, I mean, up to this point is you got rid of Tom Thibodeau because he was running players into the ground. But go as many minutes as possible, and that screams roster problems, and that's an issue on the general management staff. If you have your brand new hand-picked coach that's going to take this roster and run with it, and he's doing the same thing that you hated the old coach for, then maybe that says this roster is not very good, and you need to improve it, general management staff / ownership. I mean, there's vast worlds of difference between who Tom Thibodeau and Fred Hoiberg are, but the two guys are doing similar things because they can't trust this roster, and that's a problem with ownership and management. Like I said, your guards stink. Your general manager is talking. There's rumors that they're going to, after Paul Gasol opts out, give him a max contract. Really? He's basically a slight upgrade of Carlos Boozer. And give me a second before you start going, no way, he's not Carlos Boozer, blah, blah, blah. He's actually won a championship. Where my point is Carlos Boozer was a guy who was brought in to be a second scorer, and he only provided points in non-essential minutes. It was basically garbage time. He's scoring those. It was garbage points and garbage time, and he just padded his stats. He didn't fit in what the coaching staff was trying to do. He was a liability most of the time. They had to make a choice of when do they play him, when do they sit him, how are we gonna benefit the team? And if you have a superstar that's supposed to be your scoring guy, your secondary scoring guy, he can't be a role player. He can't be a guy that sits the whole fourth quarter. He can't be that guy. And Paul Gasol is the new Carlos Boozer. He doesn't fit in with what Fred Hoiberg is trying to do. And you've already pretty much said Fred Hoiberg is here for the long haul. Not going to pay because you're not going to pay Tom Thibodeau's contract. and the rest of Fred Hoiberg's contract and the contract of a new coach. So Fred Hoiberg is here. Paul Gasol does not fit with what Fred Hoiberg's trying to do with running up and down the court. Paul Gasol does not like to run. Paul Gasol likes to sit in that half-court offense and take as much time as possible, move the ball around, do some isolations, pick and rolls, and that's not what Fred Hoiberg's trying to do. Fred Hoiberg wants to move the ball at a fast pace, get the ball up the court, force the other team into mistakes that you capitalize on, and force them to run with you. Paul Gasol's not doing that. You're basically, if you keep him on your roster when he opts out at the end of the year, what you're saying to Fred Hoiberg is, we don't care, shut up and coach. And what they're saying to the fans is, we are not going to win. This is what you're getting. And I don't care if Paul Gasol is an all-star. Paul Gasol is a good basketball player. Paul Gasol would kill me one-on-one. Paul Gasol puts up good numbers, but he's not what this team needs. He's old, and he's just draining it. He's draining resources that you could be using for other things, like Kevin Durant. It's silly to me to re-sign him. It's at that point you're just trying to keep butts in the seats, and I get that's what ownership wants, but you want to try to win, and status quo is not going to win. You're not going to find a guy in Paul Gasol that's going to help you get over that next hump, because he's already shown in this 2 years being here that he's not the guy to get you over that hump. He's not going to take this roster and do anything with it. You've got to scratch it, everything, and start anew as best you can. What else with the Bulls is I was reading that the viewership, local TV viewership for the Bulls is down almost 30%. It's 29%. It's down 29% where it was last year. That just tells you how bad the Bulls are, that nobody is interested in watching them. It's wintertime in Chicago. You would think that people would have nothing better to do than watch some TV because it's cold outside and you don't want to do things. At least in the summertime when baseball's on, you expect maybe the lower ratings because it's nice out. People want to do things outside, outdoorsy activities, festivals, concerts, etc., things that are outdoors in the winter. And people are doing that still to the same pace that they always done it. But they're just not watching the Bulls. They're watching something else. Major League Soccer, reruns of I Love Lucy. I don't know what they're watching. It's not the Bulls. And that should just scream to John Paxson and Gar Forman that the product you have on the court is garbage and you have the wrong guy to coach garbage. You don't have a guy who's won over this team. And this isn't all on Fred Hoiberg, because if you can't make spoiled millionaire babies respect a coach that they don't respect. And, I mean, they got rid of a hellfire and brimstone coach in Tom Thibodeau who screamed at you, do your job, do your job, do your job, and while you're doing your job, but you've got a much more laid-back, player-friendly coach, and these guys can't get along with him either. If you can't get along with two coaches back-to-back, two different style of coaching, maybe then it's your players, and it's time to move on. You just gave a max contract to Jimmy Butler, who he's not willing to buy into your system. So where does that put you? Jimmy Butler's a great basketball player, but he's not doing the things he needs to do to be a game-changing guy. Just because you gave him max contract money doesn't mean he's a max contract player. It just means that you overpaid him. He's a guy that's very good basketball player, but he's not transcending the game. He's not LeBron James. He is not Curry. He's not Kevin Durant. He's not Russell Westbrook. He's not Kawhi Leonard. He's not one of these guys. He's Jimmy Butler. He's a very good player. He's an all-star, but he's not one of those transformative players. So you got to ask yourself then, at what point are Gar Forman and John Paxton's heads on the chopping block? I mean, you paid for Derrick Rose, and you screwed that up with PR moves. Is you let him go in front of the camera with Reggie Rose, and they blew it. You try to keep things secret, and that looked terrible. You signed Paul Gasol. You got rid of a beloved coach that you fought with, and that's not the first coach you fought with either. I believe I've heard about Jackson is an issue. I love John Paxson as a player, but as a general manager, he sucks. He's awful. And you get rid of a beloved coach who rightfully think it was time for him to move on, but you bring in a guy who's not doing any better. He's doing much worse than what you did with Tom Thibodeau. And then his drafts haven't been very great. You traded 2 draft picks to get Doug McDermott. And that was your guy. He was the piece you were going to build on. And here's some of the players that you could have gotten if you wouldn't have drafted Doug McDermott. You could have got Zach LaVine if you made the trade with your 2 picks and traded up and just didn't draft Doug McDermott. You could have had Zach LaVine. You could have had Dario Saric, who's been playing really well. And you could have had, and if you wouldn't have made the trade at all and you would have just picked 2 picks, you could have had Rodney Hood. You could have had Jordan Clarkson. You could have had Yusuf Nurkic. These are all players that are much better than what you have. These are decent players. You could have built on that, but instead you drafted Doug McDermott. You made a trade, 2 picks to get Doug McDermott, and he's shown flashes he can be good, but for the overall ness of it, he just hasn't been very good. So at what point do you hold your general manager and your president of the team accountable for coaching decisions, poor drafts, poor free agent signings? At what point do you hold them accountable for that? If it's me, I don't care how loyal you are. If you're the owner of this team, they've got to go. Bring in a better general manager staff. Sorry. And that's going to bring us to a new segment that we started last week that I like to call Jeremy Roenick's WTF.
What the is he doing?
This WTF moment it's going to be a little bit different than what we'd normally do on this show. It's not even going to be about hockey, which is what the segment's called. We're going to talk about the Super Bowl. We recorded last week during the Super Bowl and had a chance to watch it and sit down and break it down. And everybody says you need a great quarterback to be able to go to the Super Bowl. You need a great quarterback. The Bears don't have a great quarterback, blah, blah, blah. What I saw on that game is that you need to build a great defense, and that's what you need, a great defense to win a championship. Is great defense beats great offense. You had the Carolina Panthers, who had been rolling over teams, scoring tons of points. And on the other side, you have Peyton Manning, who at one point was one of, if not the best quarterback in the NFL. Active, he has a dead arm. He's not the same guy he was. He got benched for a guy named Brock Osweiler. And don't let them fool you that he was injured. He may have had plantar fasciitis. I actually have it in both feet. And guess what? I have no problems. I do what I do. I do what I have to do. And I'm sure I'm not a professional athlete, but I'm also not getting constant medical treatments either. I went to a podiatrist once. They gave me a shot. Then they gave me some custom insoles for my feet, and I'm all going along on my day. He had it in one foot, his constant medical treatment, and is a professional athlete, and he couldn't play for over a month. That is screaming to me that they couldn't bench him because he's Peyton Manning. but Brock Osweiler was the better option. You end up benching Brock Osweiler because he was terrible, and you decide to put Peyton Manning back in. You get to the Super Bowl, and these are the stats that you're getting. Cam Newton, 18 for 41, 265, 0 touchdowns, 1 interception. Peyton Manning, 13 for 23, 141 yards, 0 touchdowns, and 1 interception. You combined the two quarterbacks from this game. They're combined 31 for 64, 406 yards, 0 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. That's under 50% completion rating, and that's a 55.86 quarterback rating. So that's what I have to say to people that say you need a great quarterback to win a Super Bowl, is you need a quarterback that's not going to turn the ball over and is able to throw and make third down conversions, and you need a great defense. And that's my point about the Bears. That's what you have to do to win the Super Bowl. So all those quote-unquote NFL experts that are praising your Aaron Rodgers and your Carson Palmers and all that, this is your MVP and your Hall of Fame quarterback combining for a 55.86 quarterback rating, and Von Miller is the MVP of the Super Bowl. I want to move over to the Blackhawks. I don't have much to say because I really want to get to a couple of other things, but they've been cruising along, really on pace to achieve what they did last year, which is win the Stanley Cup. They have a few bumps in the road, and this is not a finished product here. You're a team that's still looking for another wing player, and ideally with Taves and Hossa. It's nothing against Andrew Shaw. He's done a really great job, and that line has been much better since he's been there. He's clearly been the best option all season long to put over there. But if you can find somebody that's a better option than Andrew Shaw, you can push Shaw down to the third line and make that line better. He's a better option. So you could really use that. You could also use a top 4 defenseman, which then makes it your top 4 defensemen, Duncan Keith, Seabrook, Hjalmarsson, and insert name of player here, that pushes down, who you're relying on, young players or old players that can't skate. You're not having to rely on those to be a top 4. You can have them be, the bottom 2 defensemen, either a 5, 6, or a 7. So you need both of those players, keeping some sort of cap flexibility to be able to trade for a player coming in less than 2 weeks. I don't think you have the room to be able to get both those guys, but one of those position players is going to bring Chris Versteeg back. But I really can't see that because he was in the doghouse last time he was with the Blackhawks. And sure, he's won 2 Stanley Cups with them, and he knows how the Blackhawks operate. He knows the players. He could be a fit, but he just didn't perform last time he was here. He was much more of a liability than he was an asset. I don't see that as really an option, especially when you're going to have to give up younger players or draft picks to get them. And then we come to, the chink in the armor of the Blackhawks, and that's messing with that second line. Is you have Artemi Panarin, he gets sick and misses a couple of games, and that line gets, mixed up a little bit because he's not available, and suddenly the offense sputters a lot, and that's the driving force of the Blackhawks is that second line. It's everything to them. So it's you've got to be able to maintain the health of that second line in order to, have any chance of trying to repeat for the Stanley Cup. And then there's a stat, I don't quote me on it because I glanced at it quickly and I don't remember exactly. I can't remember where I found it, but that almost 7 games in the NHL are won by the team that scores first. So it really sets up, and I know championship caliber teams are going to be a little bit exempt from that because they have the ability to overcome. They have that inner competitive spirit to be able to overcome that. But when you're playing top level teams and you give up that first goal, you're setting yourself in a hole. It's a hard thing to come back from. And you have a couple of games where you had goals disallowed. You had the Hossa one versus the Coyotes, and then you had the other one versus the Sharks. You end up falling behind, and both of those should have been good goals. Like I've watched them again, and I don't understand why, especially the Hossa one, why it was disallowed. It's really frustrating. And if he's losing his mind because, and he's even said that I clearly don't understand the rules anymore for a game I've played and coached for so long. You're talking about a Hall of Fame coach who's second all time in wins for NHL coach, and he clearly doesn't understand the rules that you're doing. The NHL, I've sworn up and down, they are the absolute best of the major sports as far as officiating goes. They do it by the books. Most of the time is very fair. You don't have a lot of blown calls or letting people slide like what they do with NBA with traveling. They really call it like it's supposed to be called for the most part. But it's a human element. Some rules leave a little bit more of interpretation and individuals, personal beliefs of how it should be. But for the most part, the NHL is really good. But there are flaws, and when that goal goes to New York, that should be clear cut. That should be get it right, because the NHL has that system where it goes right to, I'm sorry, not to New York, that's an NFL, where it goes right to Toronto, and they should be making the absolute right call because they are sitting in a booth without any sort of external pressures, and they're supposed to make the right call, and they didn't do it twice. And that's infuriating. And it's really hurts the Blackhawks, and that's not saying that's why they lost the game, but when you have San Jose, for instance, who's a team that is an abomination as far as coming back, but they're very good when they have a lead, and you give them a lead, it's a tough thing to come back from, and they ended up winning 2-0. The second goal being an empty netter. Is you give the Blackhawks a goal, and suddenly this is the Blackhawks are up 1-0, and this could be a different ballgame. In the end, does it mean anything? Probably not, but it's an infuriating thing that the NHL absolutely needs to get right. I guess that's really all I want to say about the Blackhawks. We'll get more to them later. I just, if you can hear, I've got a really sore throat. I'm fighting off a cold. So I want to talk about a couple more things before I wrap this up. I want to move on to the Bears quickly. I wasn't going to do any Chicago Bears, but the breaking news of Matt Forte is no longer Chicago Bear. In my plans, I put together an off-season plan that I think would be the best for the Bears, and it doesn't really mean anything other than a talking point for the show or a discussion point if I'm on somebody else's show or chatting with friends or coworkers or whatever. Matt Forte was in my plans, and I threw out I believe it was a 2-year, $8 million deal, which pays with 100% guaranteed. It makes Matt Forte still a top 10 highest paid running back in the NFL, and gives you a little more flexibility because you're paying him a lot less than you had been paying him, and it brings him back for another year, another 2 years. And I think I'm comfortable enough with his injury history or lack thereof, and his splitting the load with your other two backs, Kadeem Carey and Jeremy Langford. You're gonna be able to get those miles out of him. He's in good shape. He's had very little major injuries, and you're going to be splitting it between 3 running backs. I felt like your offense is going to be better with all 3 running backs than 2, and trying to find a third guy off the streets or from the pile heap that you had last year. But the Bears management disagreed, and apparently from what I'm hearing is they made this decision a long time ago that Matt Forte was not going to be in their plans going forward. And I can understand that. Is maybe part of me, the way I did that was a little more sentimental because Matt Forte has been a great Chicago Bear, and I'll define that more in a minute. But I still think that he is valuable enough, A, to keep away from certain of your competitor teams like the Green Bay Packers, but also to have a guy that puts buttons in seats and the fans love and is going to be a help in your passing game and your running game. I just wish the Bears would have been a little more vocal in letting him know and being proactive in letting him know that they weren't going to sign him. But from what I'm hearing, they made that decision a long time ago. And Matt Forte, and again, this is he said, she said, and only one party speaking, so I wasn't there. I can't be positive. But Matt Forte is saying that the Bears didn't say anything to him for a long time after the season ended, until just this week. And they basically said he's no longer in our plans. You wish that they would have been to a professional guy like that and a good guy, been more upfront and honest with him if what he's saying is true, and told him upfront that they weren't going to make a move to sign him so he could work and try to find a new team. What else? So you have to ask yourself is if he wanted to be back and they didn't even make him a contract offer, is why is that? First thing is, what I'm hearing is they didn't want to put a low-ball contract offer because they saw how that blew up with the Urlacher situation. Is they made him a take-it-or-leave-it deal, and they gave him a $2 million a year offer, and he felt he was much more valuable than that. And they didn't want to do that and have that backfire in their face, so they just decided not to offer him anything because they didn't want to bring him back. The other thing I'm thinking is maybe the Bears management and Ryan Pace and John Fox feel that they are a little further away than previously thought as far as getting to a Super Bowl, and that by the time the Bears are good enough that he's going to be at the end of that contract and you're just paying him to keep him away from another team. Is that the case? I can't be certain of that either, but you hope that's not. I really don't think so. I feel like the offense is, especially when you get wide receivers healthy and put a couple of offensive line pieces there, is going to be plenty good enough to be a playoff caliber team. It's just going to be how you replace that defense, and that's going to depend a lot on what draft picks you get and what free agents you sign. And this is a pipe dream that's not going to happen, but let's say Denver can't figure out their cap situation and they can't sign Von Miller, and the Bears sign him. So you have Von Miller and Pernell McPhee on either side of each other. You spend a high draft pick on a corner or safety. You sign another corner or safety, and then draft another defensive lineman. Suddenly, your defense gets a lot more stout. Anything's possible, so I don't really, hopefully don't see that as the situation. But regardless, Matt Forte is no longer a Chicago Bear. And I want to take a quick second and talk about his legacy. I'm hearing a lot of fans saying that he's a Hall of Fame caliber player, or he's one of the best Chicago Bears of all time. And I think that's getting the cart before the horse a little bit. If you look at his stats, he's been, when I called him earlier, a great Chicago Bear, and I told you I'd discuss that more in a minute. What I mean is he's played very hard. He did the things he needed to do. He was a professional, and he was a really good teammate and a good person to the community. He was good to the fans. He was good for the organization, and he's the type of player that you want around. But were his stats great? Was he a great player? He made a Pro Bowl twice. I believe he's 38th all-time in in rushing yards. He hasn't cracked that 10,000 yard mark. He doesn't have any kind of stats to put him in the Hall of Fame category. And his great achievement has been yards, total yards, and receiving yards. And honestly, I don't think those types of numbers for running back are that great to have. That says that your offense is so bad that they've got to dump it off to the running back. And sure, he make him good because he's getting yards after the catch, but wouldn't you rather have a more functioning offense? Wouldn't you rather have a wide receiver with your top receiver, number of catches and number of yards? That's the way you would imagine they draw it up, not using your running back like that. I mean, even a team like New England, who uses the short passing game as a surrogate for their running game, they don't even have their running back be the leading catcher. It's not good for your team. So it's really, Matt Forte has benefited a lot from being on a bad team, but he just isn't putting up the yards, and he's not that bruising guy that can carry a team on his back like a Franco Harris or a Earl Campbell or a Jim Brown, or even a more modern day is Beast Mode. Like, he's not that type of guy. He's not a guy that you game plan for. He's a really good back, but he's not a guy that you had to game plan for. You're like, we got to stop Matt Forte. And if you want to talk about him as far as all-time great Bears player-wise, is he's probably the third all-time best Bears running back. He's certainly not as good as Gale Sayers, and he's definitely not as good as Walter Payton. That leaves him, probably third, maybe fourth, because we have to say Red Grange. Where do you put him? Willie Gallimore, where do you put him? Maybe Matt Forte is fifth. I don't know. He's definitely not top two. But either way, I'm still sad to see him go, and I hope he doesn't wind up with Green Bay, because that would just be a heartbreaker if he winds up being a Packer. And that's what I'm going to end there with. With the NFL and the Chicago Bears. I wanted to talk a little bit of baseball, but this is going to be a long show, and I don't want to bore you guys to death. So what we're going to do to wrap this up is every week, going up to the draft, is we cover one position, and we try to cover a lot of the top position players at that position that are going to be in the NFL draft. So we've already done the running backs, we've done the wide receivers, we've done the defensive tackles. This week we're going to be working in the cornerbacks. So we're going to talk about a bunch of the top cornerbacks that we think will be chosen in the NFL draft. And I say this every week, I have limited amount of time in order to, the way I do this is I sit down and I watch every play for a whole game that the player's involved in. I don't just watch highlight reels or, best of, or, whatever case may be. I watch every single play of an entire game, and I watch several games for each player, as many as I can find. And I really want to see what they do if you're a cornerback, when they're throwing the other side of the field, or when they're running, or whatever the case may be. I want to know when they're involved in the play, when they're not involved in the play, how they are playing on the field. So I watch all of that, and I try to evaluate it. And so it takes, as you can imagine, it's really time consuming. So I pick up several guys, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 guys. If there's a guy I didn't talk about that you want to know about, please just let me know. I'm more than happy to go back. I just sort of have to draw a line. So I pick like 10, 12, 15 random guys that are listed on the top 3-4 rounds of draft. And I evaluate those guys. But if I miss somebody you really want to see, let me know. I'm more than happy to go back. And if the Bears end up drafting a guy that I haven't talked about, I'll certainly go back and look at as well. So there's that. So this week we're going to do cornerbacks. And I want to give my impressions overall first. Is first, the cornerbacks is I'm not that high on the cornerback class either. I said it with the wide receivers. I wasn't very high. The defensive tackles, I'm not very high. This is shaping up to be a very weak draft class unless you have guys that step up to the next level and perform better than they did in college. There's a lot of guys that I'm looking at in this cornerback class that they have a lot of good attributes, but then they have some negative things, and nobody is that perfect package of what you're looking for as far as being comfortable saying that I'm really comfortable this guy is going to make it to the next level and perform well. And this is, it's a little disheartening. So first I'm going to go with Vernon Hargreaves III, cornerback out of Florida, 5'11", 198. He's fast. He's got really fluid hips, athletic guy. He's got return experience, and a lot of draft sites and draft gurus are ranking him as the top cornerback in the draft. But if you watch him play, he plays way off the corner. He starts 10, 15 yards off the cornerback, which I'm seeing is a lot of college players are doing this. But he doesn't really press. He's a bad leg tackler, so he goes right for the legs, and he's not very good at that. He avoids contact whenever he can. I mean, if it's coming right at him, he's going to step in and try to make the tackle. But if he doesn't have to come in there and make that tackle, he's not going to do it. I'm not a huge fan of Vernon Hargreaves. He got beat several times when he was part of a double team. So him and a safety over the top against Alabama, and they both got beat. Alabama doesn't have elite wide receivers. You shouldn't be doing that. You should be able to win that matchup. That was disheartening, and he missed a tackle on that caused a first down. So if he would have made it, I think it was a 4th and 1 in the Tennessee game. He did a cornerback blitz, missed the tackle, ended up pushing the guy forward and giving him a first down, and that was a big no-no in my book too. And sure, those are just 2-3 plays that I saw happen, but I didn't see a lot of exciting things either from Vernon Hargreaves. I think he's overrated, and I wouldn't be drafting him in the first round. Next is Jalen Ramsey out of Florida State, 6'1", 211. He's physical, fairly big for a cornerback at 6'1", 211. He is not afraid to make a tackle, and he will run right through a block. But he's a bit of a sloppy technique guy. He's got a bit of stiff hips, so he's going to go from a back pedal right to turn and run. He's not going to be able to glide in that motion. It's really a bit rigid. And what that happens is when he's trying to go from a back pedal to drive or on a double move, he's going to have some trouble in those types of situations. But he's aggressive, he's tall, he's physical, and I'm not sure why scouts like Hargrave better than Ramsey. Ramsey might be my top cornerback pick, but I still think he's still got some deficiencies that scare me a little bit. But I'm going to say he might be the top cornerback in this draft, in my opinion. And when I say that, nobody has the whole package, and I'm not seeing a lot of those guys, is everybody's got weaknesses. There's nobody, even in the NFL, that even Pro Bowl players that don't have a weakness. I mean, even Tom Brady, you could say that he's slow. If you could run faster, he could, be a better quarterback. Everybody's got a little something that they could be better at. But I'm seeing a lot of more severe things that they'll need to improve to be an NFL player, that red flags that could make them busts. That's what I'm talking about. So next is Mackenzie Alexander out of Clemson, 5'10", 195. He's fast. He's got really fluid hips. He's an aggressive tackler, but he's had some hamstring issues in college, and he's got a sloppy technique that's going to need to be corrected. He's a good cover corner, but he's going to need to get stronger to beat some blocks and to be able to press more at the line of scrimmage. He's a little bit of a weaker guy. You could watch him, not be able to pressing along the line of scrimmage with a wide receiver and be able to jam him off the line. He can't do that, and he gets blocked very easily, and he's going to need to be able to get better at that in the NFL. Next is Eli Apple out of Ohio State, 6'1", 198. He's got nice technique, good hips, nice hands for, I saw him make some really beautiful interceptions. Yeah, he's got good speed, but he's an awful tackler. It's sad watching him tackle. He's also a bit too handsy with wide receivers. He's going to get flagged a lot in the NFL for that. I mean, he's really hands-on, aggressive. You're going to need if you draft him, you're really going to have to work with him to kind of lay off of that. But his instincts are always to be grabby, and they're going to flag that all the time in the NFL. So that's a big concern for me. Next is Kendall Fuller out of Virginia Tech, 6', 197. He's got the NFL family lineage, the DNA. His brother plays for the Chicago Bears in Kyle Fuller. He's got really good technique, good tackler, but he needs to turn his head more on deeper passes. He's running with the guy. He's not getting beat on the double moves as much, but he doesn't turn his head, and that's going to be flagged in the NFL. But he can get burned by double moves. I've seen it happen. He tries to be smarter than the just reacting. I don't know if he's watching game film or he's watching quarterback's eyes, but he'll get beat by a double move, and it looks like he's trying to sit underneath on something. But he has all the tools and the DNA to be an NFL caliber cornerback, but he's going to need to be coached up well. And if you're a Bears fan, you may not like Kyle Fuller because he's had some confidence issues, and he's been up and down in his career with the Bears. Kendall Fuller is a lot like Kyle Fuller. I thought he might be a little better coming out, but he didn't progress anymore. I think he's about the same as Kyle Fuller, and I loved Kyle Fuller coming out of college. I think Kendall Fuller is a very competent back, and he's going to be a good corner in the NFL as long as he can be receptive to coaching. Next, you got William Jackson III, 6'1", 185 out of Houston. He can deliver some heavy hits. He's a big corner, looks bigger than he is, got really good hands, nice soft hands. He plays a really good center field. Like he can, when he on deep balls, he's like a hawk out there. But he's really stiff-hipped. Double moves catch him like crazy, and he doesn't look that fast. Like he looks a little bit slow as compared to some of the other players that are out in that area. Being honest, I think he's a zone corner. I don't think he can play man-to-man in an NFL scheme. He's going to have to be a zone corner. He's not really the best athlete. He didn't play against super big college competition on a regular basis playing Houston. I ultimately think he could be a safety. I think that'll be a good transition for him. Just don't be shocked if you see that happen. Next is Artie Burns, 6 foot even, 197 out of Miami. Artie Burns is really aggressive. He is a fiery competitor, fluid hips, athletic guy, great hands, but he would much rather take a risk to try to go for an interception than actually be the safer play and try to break the pass up. That's, if you're making the interceptions, you can take it and live with it, but he's given up some plays trying to go for that interception. He lacks elite speed, and he's not a good tackler, but he is aggressive. He reminds me a lot of Cortland Finnegan, where he's always just a fiery guy. He's aggravating. He's always chirping at you. He's fiery guy, but not the most athletic or fastest or biggest guy, but he gets the job done. So he reminds me a lot of Cortland Finnegan, but a little sloppy. And if you watch him, when I say sloppy, is if you watch him rather than go from his back pedal to kind of turn and sidestep and run, he'd much rather just turn and run with you. He's not going to go through the steps that you need to be a great corner and to have best technique. He'd much rather just turn and run. And I think that comes from lack of elite speed and worried about guys running past him. The last couple guys, you've got Will Redmond, 6 foot 185 out of Mississippi State. He's got great technique, fluid hips, great cover man, looks really good. But again, he doesn't have elite speed. He misses some tackles, and he can get blocked out bad in the running game. I like him a lot, and I think he's got a lot of upside. Will Redmond is a sleeper pick for me. I think if you could get a little more strength on him, he's got the talent and the technique to be able to be a good cover corner in this league. Next is Xavier Howard, 6'2", 200 out of Baylor. He's a big cornerback at 6'2". When he's going on a deep ball, he turns his head so he can make a play on it, and that's really good. So he's going to be able to get a lot more physical with the wide receiver when he turns his head, because if you turn your head, shows the referees that you're making a play for the ball, you can be a lot more physical with the wide receiver without getting a pass interference penalty. And he can turn his hips really fluidly and easily and run with a wide receiver. But even though he's 6'2" and 200 pounds, he looks tiny out there, and he gets turned around a lot. So when he goes deep on passes, as he's turning his head, it's like he gets confused of where he is and loses sight of where he is and sort of misses the ball. So even though he's turning his head, he looks a little turned around out there. I think his role is going to be as a slot or a nickel corner in the NFL, just because of some of the issues I talked about. But I think he could be good in that role, but he's going to have to be a slot or a nickel guy. Next up is Maurice Kennedy out of Virginia, 6'1", 180. He's a good punt returner. He takes really good angles when he's coming from the opposite side of the field. But he's too quick to turn and run with the receiver rather than stay in the back pedal and try to play the shorter routes. He's a zone corner all the way. He's got, he just doesn't have that elite ability to be able to cover, to be a press man coverage guy in the NFL. But to be fair, I had limited game film I could get of him, so I could only watch one game on him or 2 games on him. That's all I could watch. But last up we're going to talk about is Zach Sanchez out of Oklahoma, 5'11", 180. He's a nice tackler. He doesn't really do press coverage. Everything is playing off. He'd much rather just run and shadow a guy, play off of him, than try to be physical. And in the NFL, if your front four can't get a pressure on the quarterback, if you're not altering that guy from his path, he's going to beat you after a while. He's kind of lazy and sloppy technique. He's not a thumper at all, which has been most of the cornerbacks in this draft, and not a lot of thumpers. Zach Sanchez is a guy I totally stay away from. So that's going to do it for this episode of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. Thank you guys so much for listening. Next week, we'll be breaking down the centers in the draft. Ooh, centers. Look for that. So the schedule is next week centers, the week after that quarterback, then tight end, guard, safety, inside linebacker, outside linebacker, defensive end / outside line, 4-3-4 outside linebacker, and then offensive tackle, week off, then the NFL draft. I may switch it up a little bit there, but I think as of now, we're probably going to stick to center next week, unless they look terrible too. And then I might do some of the pass rushers to decide to see if I could see anybody good in this draft so far. But thank you guys so much for listening, and until next time, bear down.
Cubs win! What a lucky break! The good Lord wants the Cubs to win!
We thank Ditka and God for all they have provided.
Cubs win! Cubs win! Cubs win!
Oh, I don't want her. You can have her. She's a Packer fan. She can't fit in my van.
And she looks like number New Yorkers. Smoking crack is not legal on planes. Bears 31 to -7. The Bears.
Oh, when the Bears go bearing down.